Welcome to the Tying Telco Together, a program where we dive into successful transformation stories from service providers around the world. This week, we're talking with Mark Chong, Group Chief Technology Officer at Singtel, as well as Sanjay Uppal, who is the SVP and GM of the Service Provider and Edge business at VMware. Welcome to both of you. So, 5G continues to be a priority for service providers around the world as they look to reinvent their role in this new digital ecosystem. While we've been seeing early 5G deployments for a few years now, there are only a few real standalone 5G network deployments around the world. Singtel happens to be one of them. So I look forward to digging into this topic with both Singtel and VMware today. So Mark, my first question is for you, to another Singaporean here. Typically, when service providers look to bring new technologies into their architectures, there's a lot of due diligence on proven use cases. I understand Singtel took a slightly different approach to this challenge as an early adopter. Can you speak to the operational strategies that you use in order to be one of the first to launch a standalone, a 5G network, a 5G SA network?
Well, I think we are very much early in the 5G journey. 5G is a relatively new standard. And I think for all you guys and people in the industry know, it will take some time for the eventual customers, whether it's an enterprise or a consumer, for them to adopt and adapt to the new technological standards. And for us, we wanted to, basically, if you will, get quickly to first base, put up the 5G SA standard network, and let enterprises or ecosystem partners play with the network, trial their applications on the network, and get themselves ready for this new mobile technological shift, if you will. It's quite a transformational change for the organization as well. We know there's a radio, there's the core, there's transmission in between. But in this shift to the 5G SA network, we were upgrading each of that three parts at the same time, upgrading radio, upgrading core, making transmission programmable. But that's not the only thing we had to do, because the whole point about 5G SA is to render the network programmable. So it involves exposing the controls of the network to the eventual customers. So for us, what that meant was creating new digital capability, new software programming capability, so that we can program the network and support customers who need to program our network.
No, that makes sense. Let me turn it over to Sanjay for a moment here. So Sanjay, VMware is quite familiar with these more software-friendly operational shifts, as Mark was talking about, sort of programmability, right? In fact, I presume your expertise in this space is often one of the motivations that CSPs look to partner with you at VMware, right? What other kinds of operational shifts are you seeing in service providers who are looking to move more quickly to become more agile?
Yeah, I think that, as Mark pointed out, firstly, in order to get 5G out, we didn't wait this time along with our customers for all the use cases to be obvious before launching the service. I think it's really important that we hand the network to the enterprise customers, because whenever they use it, even in its early form, it's like they hand us back a flashlight. And the flashlight illuminates the path ahead, because they give us this very valuable feedback. And we use this feedback to, as an example, work with Mark's team in order to figure out what kind of services will actually be successful, so that then when 5G rolls out in full-blown, it is deployed en masse by a number of enterprises.
Yeah, no, I think, Sanjay, you make a very good point, which is VMware historically has a very strong development background, development platform. Programmability, automation has always been there from the early days. And the proof points in terms of the SD-WAN and the SASE moves that VMware has made, right? And now moving into the RAN as well and enabling the core, I think it's just an extension and proving that the VMware infrastructure and your DNA, as it were, is able to transfer across all areas of the telco. So excellent. Speaking and keeping on the topic of operational shifts. So Mark, when you make this kind of shifts, it's also a cue to your entire organization and also the industry at large that you're certainly more than just a communication service provider. You've gone digital, and I think some of the recent announcements around Singtel's Paragon platform, very groundbreaking. So what are Singtel's goals with regard to this new role in the ecosystem and new relationship with the market?
We think that, as I've mentioned, we are quite early stage of the 5G journey. So there's a incubation period, we think, 3 to 5 years before new business models, new ecosystems come onto the scene. We need to get ready for that. So when we introduce and push towards the 5G SA network and the need to develop programmability skills, our intent was to signal to the internal organization, the world is moving digital. We need to get up to speed to support the enterprises who will adapt to this new technology, the 5G SA. And that's what we were preparing for essentially.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point, which is very often we place a lot of hype and buzz around the 5G moniker, and we expect that, the moment the network launches, all the magic happens along with that. And as you point out, rightly so, it takes a couple of years because first you have to understand the technology. Well, you have to roll it out. If you don't have the infrastructure to experiment and build on, there's no way you can understand the implications of the new network capabilities on what it can do for your enterprise applications. So I think that's an excellent point you just made, Mark, and I think that also sets expectations for the real world that it's going to be some time, right, before we actually see the full monetization. And when we do, it's going to be quite I think, maybe surprising, right? Because I don't think we expected like Uber or Lyft, right, with 4G networks. I don't think anyone expected that, but they came along and innovation came. I mean, the transformation is an ongoing process. And what I was going to ask Sanjay is these kinds of transformations are still quite rare, right? I think Singtel is one of the early ones, right? It's still rare in the communications industry in particular. And so, Sanjay, what do you see service providers like Singtel that are doing differently to transform their organizations to these kinds of software-centric, agile, DevOps-enabled operations?
In our space, in network infrastructure, I say that this is not one of those cool and sexy spaces that people really think about, but we are really excited about the change that is happening right now because the programmability of the network we've been talking about for decades, that an application can come in and on demand can ask for a slice of the network or a piece of the network. Slice happens to be, the word that is used most commonly right now, and then can get it on the fly, can return it back when they're done, and then can move on. And there's so many myriads of applications that can make use of it.
I completely agree with you. We've talked about programming a network, and it's one thing when you're just programming the WAN, when you're just programming a data center network. It's a whole different thing when it's a mobile network with device in everyone's hands, right? And it's personalized. It's your device, and you can reach everyone on the mobile network. And by the way, everyone's on that mobile network and not just people, devices as well. And so exposing the programmatic interface to that, I think it's going to unlock a lot of exciting new services. And so maybe, Mark, can you review maybe some of the capabilities that you are looking to enable with your standalone 5G SA network?
Well, for one, I think what we've mentioned, network slicing. Right now, I think we've got version 1.0 of it. We're trying to progress to a more dynamic creation of network slices. And then all the benefits touted of 5G, faster download speed. But we find that higher uplink speeds, that's actually very much sought after by enterprises. Low latency, that's certainly so. And especially we are talking about latency that can be delivered only if you are close to the edge. We are talking about not just 5G, but also creating a stack what we call the edge, the mobile edge computing, close to the customer, delivering all the capabilities that they need, whether it's on the factory floor or in a shipyard, for example, or in a port, delivering low latency, high throughput, uplink and downlink speeds. Yeah. And later on, of course, the high density connectivity of 5G for IoT sensors.
Those definitely are exciting advancements, but we're actually able to experience it, and you point out enhanced mobile broadband, not just the downlink speeds which we've had for at least reasonable time, but the uplink, which as you point out enables new use cases, allows you to broadcast stream video uplinks over 5G. Certainly exciting advancements. And then you brought in another point here which we haven't talked about yet, which is the edge computing, when coupled with that low latency, high capacity network. I think that will enable sort of new platforms, new services. But are there any kind of services that you're looking for enabling with these new platforms? And have you changed some of the innovation practices within Singtel to leverage your Mac platform coupled with your 5G network?
Yes, certainly. So some of the new use cases that we see are from our customers, of course. For example, in Singapore, we are trialing at a port. In the port, there's lots of automated guided vehicles that stack empty containers one on top of each other, or they unload container boxes from ships that are berthed. So they need high throughput uplink so that the remote operator of these automated guided vehicles actually could see very clearly how he's stacking up such containers. So high throughput is one. And then to prevent the automated guided vehicle from getting into incidents or accidents, the low latency response in stopping an AGV that's straying off track, that's also important. So examples like that. So in terms of enabling such things, test beds are very important, and because all this run on software, so CI/CD platforms are extremely important. But today, I think we have multiple, because you need it in the RAN, and you need it in the core, and then you need another one for the customers to trial on. And I think of particular interest is because we have gone on this journey early and provided the tools for programming the network. The Singapore government actually, the technology arm called the GovTech, worked with us, and we have turned a southern island of Singapore, and you know this, Roy, Sentosa, into a 5G test bed for government agencies to test and trial all sorts of applications leveraging on 5G.
Excellent. So these are all exciting new services. So Sanjay, as you watch, your customers, bring on these new services and bring them to market, that must be pretty exciting. And I think VMware plays a big role in their transformation. And so what are some of the other innovative services which you're seeing, other service providers like Singtel, succeed with?
The leading ports out there, to get these use cases, the low latency that Mark pointed out has very, very wide applicability. And I think Mark has some excellent data to show that the latency, if you go locally to the edge compute versus going to the public cloud, is significantly better. So there's a really deep connection and intersection between 5G SA and what's happening on the edge compute side. In fact, I think they go hand in hand. So when you talk about edge computing, there's a need for those workloads to be deployed at the edge. In fact, the edge is the place where it's the fastest growth of workloads. Today it happens to be at the edge. There's a whole host of use cases that open up. There's talk just in the last, I'd say 6 months or so, of the metaverse. And people talk of this metaverse, much more in terms of what consumers and millennials and teenagers can do. But they have very specific business use cases as well. Like, when you look at aircraft maintenance, if you are actually sitting there maintaining the aircraft, but you have full visualization of what is happening and 3D, you can walk around a model of the aircraft and compare it with what you're repairing right now. I mean, that can significantly change things that are happening in terms of turning around the aircraft as it lands. So we're talking to, logistics companies, manufacturing companies, healthcare. I think our imaginations are limited right now, but it's going to be all the consumers and the enterprises that make use of the technology that Mark and other people are going to put in their hands, hand us these flashlights, and then we're going to be dazzled by what we see ahead of us.
Yeah, no, I think we're just seeing, as you said, the tip of the iceberg in terms of the use cases, and I think putting these kind of new capabilities into the hands of enterprise developers and enterprises out there will unlock creativity, and they'll use it in ways we don't expect. But I like the concrete examples you brought up in terms of the actual performance, and we're seeing just early. I think, as Mark points out, it's early, but even then, I think Mark's got data from Singtel that shows the reliability and the performance of Mac, versus even the nearby public cloud. I think Mark, you want to maybe talk a little bit about that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, very, very quickly, with the Mac, we are able to assure that all latency points, of the app that sit on the stack are delivered less than 15 milliseconds. That's 100%, or if you will, 5 nines below 15 milliseconds. Whereas for an app sitting on a public cloud, it's a long tail of response time. So from less than 20 milliseconds to 30 milliseconds to 40 milliseconds. So when it comes to mission critical, business critical applications, we think we would like to offer such assurance of transaction to our customers.
Yeah, and that's a very concrete point that you've just demonstrated on a 5G network, and I think that's just one of the elements out there that we can expect. All these are exciting services, and it's important to help service providers thrive for sure. But it's also important to note that the journey to become a digital service provider is not about just monetizing new services quickly. So maybe can you speak to the internal operation transitions from a leadership and cultural perspective? I know Sanjay brought out and you brought out culture is one of the key elements here in the transformation, right? And so if you could do that and also describe how this new mode of operation will impact your community at large.
Yes, for one, I think when we embark on the journey, as I mentioned, we have to create new capabilities within the organization. Folks who understand mobile network and yet are interested enough and have the ability to cross to the software development part. So we needed folks, engineers who wanted to get into digital programming of networks. So we needed that. We have created that. A group of engineers who are able to do that. And at the same time, when we walk this journey, we know we can't walk alone. We needed partners to come along with us. So that's where we scanned the industry and we met VMware.
No, I think that is fair. As you point out, that the journey to transform into sort of DevOps, programmability, automation, agile, it's not an easy operation, especially for a lot of communication service providers around the world. So Mark, if you don't mind, I have another question for you. For many service providers, enabling a multi-cloud approach. Now we talked about Edge and Mac, but now let's talk about cloud as well, which is enabling a multi-cloud approach is a priority for them to ensure some level of flexibility and control, especially in light of the sort of hyperscalers' presence in the marketplace. I'm curious, as you started traversing this transformation, what do you see as the role of multi-cloud operations in supporting your goals?
The short answer to that question is it's very important. And at the edge, there we are very much working hand in hand with the customers through our Paragon platform. So we have customers who prefer whether it's VMware or whether it's Azure or AWS, we are fine. They all work with our Paragon platform, so we are happy whichever way.
So thanks, Mark. I think that's good perspective in terms of a multi-cloud approach and in terms of abstracting the multi-cloud approach as part of your Paragon platform. So Sanjay, in this multi-cloud world, what role does VMware play? And what's your advice to CSPs worldwide as they embark in a multi-cloud world, and especially one that involves both the enterprise and the carrier edge?
So we actually at VMware have focused our entire company on multi-cloud. And we think that is critically important for the CSPs because, as Mark pointed out, this is something that actually helps their own infrastructure, whether it's in the core or in the RAN. But it's also important to know that enterprises today, the majority of enterprises have more than one cloud provider that they're dealing with. So when that happens, whether it's in the context of taking an individual application and striping it across clouds, or taking the multiplicity of applications and assigning them, to a cloud at a time, there's a need for a digital infrastructure that is common, that provides you choice in an automated fashion. And that is that digital infrastructure that VMware is going about building for the multi-cloud. We're taking that same approach and saying that it should also work at the edge. So we're saying there's a VMware edge. It is multi-cloud in nature. You can deploy VMware. It still gives you choice in terms of which cloud provider that you can connect to. That connectivity should be provided on the fly. So we have obviously some early results in this. So it is a multi-cloud world right now. We're setting ourselves up to be that provider for multi-cloud because we think of ourselves as the Switzerland of digital infrastructure, that if you select us, we're neutral. We're not going to be bound together in terms of restricting your choice as you move forward.
So Sanjay, in addition to enabling digital transformation for your service providers' customers, what other corporate and social initiatives are there at VMware that you're excited about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, our understanding and expectations of what corporate responsibility looks like were totally transformed by this year of great challenges. And, we found out, obviously, it's not enough just to make promises and pledges, but responsible companies must face the crisis of things like climate change head on, pivot to remote workforces, truly act on our commitments to health, well-being, and social impact. And, at VMware, we take this role pretty seriously in helping companies around the globe transition to the next normal, and whether that means driving decarbonization, like because VMware has been deployed, we saved 1.2 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide through the year 2021 across the companies, across our customers' digital infrastructures, designing solutions for distributed workforce, because when people work out of their homes, you do get that leverage. The network is absolutely critical in getting that done. So that brings in, Mark and what he's deploying. And then also, just from a people to people standpoint, earning and keeping trust through enhanced privacy and security. At this point of, the world is in, privacy and security are top. So all of this we put it together. We call it ESG, environmental, social, and governance impact. We have a report that comes out. So, we think that we're just one player in this, but if we do this together with our customers, partners, and our peers in the industry, it's just going to help the world move forward.
In addition to all these digital transformation initiatives brought about by 5G and Mac and all these things, what are some of the other key initiatives that you and Singtel are embarking on?
Okay, thanks very much for the question, Roy. Yes, ESG is very important for us for quite a while now. We were very early in setting carbon emission reduction targets. We are committed to reducing our Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emission by about 42% by 2030. Another point that's very important for us is gender diversity. Singtel has a good representation of females at the top executives and staff level. And lastly, we believe very strongly in inclusiveness, in working with the seniors of our society. We have a program called Digital for Seniors. We think it is extremely important to involve or help the senior folks adopt these new productivity tools to enable them to keep in touch with their families and friends, especially over the last 2 years during pandemic times.
Yeah, no, I think what Sanjay and you have described are very, very important. So I think that's a very nice way to look at the holistic picture of what the role of communications or digital service providers are, not just in the industry, but in the community. Thank you, Sanjay and Mark, for your time here today and your perspectives. I think it's been very, very helpful. And once again, this is the Tying Telco Together, program series that's sponsored by VMware. And I'm Roy Chua, principal and founder at AvidThink, an analyst firm. And it's been my pleasure and honor to have been the host of today's program. So once again, thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy and Mark. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks, Sanjay. And thank you very much, Roy, both of you, for having me here today. Happy to chat with you always.